When did I start lightsaber combat? Well, that would be a long time ago. I don't even know. It's been like a couple years, 2-3 years maybe. Why did I start it? Like, I mean, it's lightsabers. They're great. Star Wars is fantastic. So now that we've grown up and we don't have to use those cheap plastic toys we used to use, that the extendable ones, you'd hit them up against each other and they'd bend over and then they'd break and they'd be useless. Now we have, the adult version where they're actually sturdy. So, I mean, duh, just makes sense.
I have been working with a stunt lightsaber now for, I actually don't know the years, but I know the approximate number of hours. It's somewhere around 1,500 hours of practice. I picked it up actually because I found Ultra Sabers advertised. Decided a couple of years later, I have to get me one of those. So I got 2, and I got 3, and ended up with 5 or 6 of them. Realized with that many, and with what I've been learning wielding one, it's probably time to put that to work.
Well, I was following some fan pages on Facebook, so just some lightsaber, just some stuff, and I saw Keller post on there about a local group, and up until then I'd just seen these YouTube videos, and looked really awesome, people playing around with these, really nice polycarbonate blades, and then I was like, wait a minute, there's a local place to do that, so that got me pretty excited. I love Star Wars, Star Trek, huge geek. And so last summer I started coming here to the park and meeting every week, and I just love it. Everybody's really nice. Everybody takes all the time that you need to learn something, and we'll go over the same thing with you 5-6 times, however much you need it if you're having trouble. You learn discipline, you learn control, and if you're a master at doing lightsaber, then you're proficient in a martial arts.
What is the philosophy of the Imperial Knights of Greenville? To learn the focus necessary to not seriously injure each other with bulletproof glass tubes. We seek to develop the focus and the patience necessary in order to engage in a relatively difficult martial art and basically a brand of performing. Here at the Imperial Knights of Greenville, a critical part to how we teach LED saber combat comes down to the 7 forms. They're directly based on the 7 forms from in-universe Star Wars canon. We borrow the names and the applications and the backstory of them to make it work. Each of the forms was developed to do a different thing, and they were largely developed in chronological order, 1 through 7. As a result, each one of them functions as a unique and fully functional martial art of its own. And that's how we teach it. That's part of the challenge, is teaching enough instructors to teach all of it correctly. The first form is called Shicho. The second form is called Makashi. The third form is called Soresu. The fourth form is called Ataru. The fifth form is split into 2 types, Gemso and Shien. They're basically related forms with the same end goal, but built for different body types. Form 6 is called Niman, and then Form 7 is again split. You have Vapad, the Jedi variant, and Juyo, the Sith variant. The first form of lightsaber combat, it's the beginner form. It effectively teaches a student the basics of using an LED saber and how to strike with it, how it differs from an actual sword. All the motions come from the core. It's a very simple, straightforward form, and that's why we have our beginners start with it. Form 2 is a 2-handed form. It focuses on quick, precise motions. The footwork tends to be linear. The blade work tends to be linear. A skilled practitioner tends to appear as though they are effectively dancing back and forth across several lines. It focuses heavily on disarming an opponent, either in scoring a hit on the weapon or on the weapon arm or fingers. It does not rely on brute strength, and mostly focuses on elegance and precision. Form 3, we ended up splitting into two separate halves. We have young Obi-Wan in the prequels and older Obi-Wan on the Death Star. These are very dramatically different saber scenes. The first half of Form 3 is in many ways similar to the preceding Form 2. It's linear, it's angular, and it focuses on moving back and forth across more or less straight lines. Blades held with both hands directly in front of the wielder, and you use your blade and motions with the blade to create effectively a shield. The most important part of this form is the focus required for it. The moves themselves are almost unimportant. It runs counter to every known martial art to stay on the defensive, to the point of not being willing to attack first. The second half of Form 3 makes full use of the LED saber as what it is. Instead of acting like a bladed implement, it treats the saber as a complete bar of omnidirectional material. As such, it focuses on, just like its first twin, defending itself strictly. However, it's with sweeping arcs and tight controlled orbits around the body. When practicing this form, it's immediately obvious what you're doing and what you're using. It tends to be a crowd pleaser. It's a very difficult form to pull off because it's all about timing. Instead of being able to rely on having the entirety of your blade in front of you keeping you safe, you have to rely on your own reflexes and your feet to keep yourself moving and out of harm's way. The fourth form that we practice is another one that's extremely difficult. It takes the concept of using the blade in circular patterns and timing to, instead of just the defense, also applying it to the offense. It's a highly orbital, highly circular form. The feet follow that same pattern. A skilled practitioner can make it look good as well as work quite well. Form 5 is split into two distinct halves. The first version is a more powerful version. A notable practitioner would be Darth Vader himself. Both halves of the form are effectively based on the concept of determination, on going forward at all costs. The first part of Form 5 is best for those who have a relatively stocky build and ideally are fairly tall. It's most closely related to longsword combat, but there's also katana elements thrown in for good measure. Most of the moves rely on effectively smashing through your opponent's defense. It relies on quick two-handed strikes with your hands fairly well spaced out on your hilt, and your footwork is equally broad and powerful. Keep yourself well grounded. It's not a form that has much in the way of elegance or looks nearly as nice as the two orbital forms that precede it. The second half of Form 5, it's effectively the entire form reworked. It looks nothing like the first half, and that's with good reason. This is for someone who doesn't have the mass and the strength to pull off the first version, consequently has to use a little bit more finesse to go forwards. Relies heavily on quick angular footwork. You don't go directly at your opponent, you effectively go sideways at your opponent. Traditionally, the saber is held backwards, like an ice pick. It is one of the harder ones that we have to teach. Very few have managed to make any headway with it whatsoever. It's another one of those that's immediately recognizable. Its strikes are quick, smooth, and as precise as can be managed. Its defense relies mostly on the feet. The sixth form is a difficult one to pin down, and that's with good reason. Unlike the previous 5, which all have established movesets and established mental patterns, Form 6 has none of these. That's because Form 6 takes elements of the preceding 5, and the user builds an individual and unique set of moves to use. It isn't a free license to simply take moves and mix and match and attempt to see what happens. That's how you build it, but once built, the form should effectively remain the same per individual. for every user, it's different. My own variation tends to be more orbital. Form 7 is another form that's split. The first half is the intelligent one, the careful one. The second half is the reckless one, the aggressive one. The first version of Form 7, it's an orbital form. It's particularly graceful when done correctly. It's mostly one-handed. It involves using the aggression and the forwardness of Form 4, as well as the defensive capabilities of Form 3, the orbital version, in order to develop itself as both a highly effective aggressive form as well as an extremely capable defender. The form is almost blindingly fast, but with such a degree of control that it's very easy to tell where the orbits are. It's another one of those that's immediately recognizable from a distance. It mostly involves using circular footwork and, as I mentioned, circular blade work. And done correctly, it's both effective as well as pleasing to look upon. The second version of Form 7 has none of the orbital grace of the first version. Instead, it focuses primarily on smashing the opponent into the ground. Take all of the angular forward motion of the first half of Form 5 and all of the orbital aggression of Form 4, combine them, and you get an extremely dangerous form. The Imperial Knights of Greenville are lucky enough to have two sister groups within a relative close proximity to us. We have the group in Clemson down that meets at the university. They are working towards official recognition with the university. They predate this group. We also have a group in Rock Hill, the Rock Hill Lightsaber Club. They meet on Winthrop's campus, but are not affiliated with the university. They are the youngest group and actually the second largest group. We all train somewhat similarly, and all of our training ranks are reciprocated among the different clubs. The Imperial Knights of Greenville have 4 ranks. 2 of those ranks have subdivisions that were just recently introduced. You start out as an initiate. When you show up on your very first day, initiates are asked to learn Form 1. They start out with foam-wrapped training implements. Eventually, they take the Acolyte Trials, which is a short informal test. As the name suggests, they then ascend to the next rank, Acolyte. The rank of Acolyte is one that most students will be at for a while. You choose of the remaining forms which one you'd like to study in depth, along with Form 1. And your end goal is to know it well enough to be able to pass a rather horrendous test, the Trials of Knighthood. That is a several hours long test designed for the individual, specifically to see how well they've learned their form. Most students spend the bulk of their time at Acolyte and then end up as Knight, and I expect most students will not progress from Knight. Acolyte and Knight are also the only 2 that have Junior and Senior as a result. At some point, several years down the line, as a Knight, once you have a minimum of 2 students who have gone through the Knighting themselves, you are then eligible to run the Gauntlet, and that is the name of the test to be announced Master. The Imperial Knights of Greenville were developed as a collaborative project between myself and Cameron Hambright. We came up here to Greenville, South Carolina, and started this one. There's not really much to it other than that. We started coming out, advertising online, and it's run from there.
We sort of like to treat ourselves as, family if possible. Everyone that likes to stick with it becomes friends very quickly. We try to do things beyond just lightsabering. Like to trade ideas, but it's always about improving. Not just lightsaber combat, but try to enjoy just our personal life. Like this is something that is also a social function.